So just a quick note before we get started is I won't be covering the technical difficulties as they've already been covered to death, and at this point I really have nothing to add that hasn't been said already. So with that, let's get on with the video. Mass Effect Andromeda has definitely received its fair share of criticism, with some being warranted and maybe some due to the legacy it was tasked to live up to. At its best, the final mission for example, Mass Effect Andromeda was thoroughly entertaining, but at its worst, I was left wondering how the newest entry in one of my favorite series could feel so empty. But with Andromeda being this new team's first shot at a Mass Effect title, and now having a solid framework to build upon for the future, I believe another truly great Mass Effect game is still possible. Ahead are 5 changes I believe could contribute to making Mass Effect Andromeda 2 one of the best in the series. Number 1. Combat style. Mass Effect Andromeda's gunplay is without a doubt a big improvement over previous games. The better sounding and feeling weapons combined with the added mobility of the jump jet makes for combat with a faster pace and added punch that simply wasn't present in the previous games. But what the previous games lacked in mobility and pace, they more than made up for with nuance and strategy. Mass Effect 1 through 3 all used a real-time strategy combat system that improved through each game and was almost perfected by Mass Effect 3. But instead of improving upon this already wonderful system, Andromeda scrapped it altogether in favor of a more streamlined experience. While definitely more accessible, this new system lacked the charm of the originals. I think a return to the RTS-style combat coupled with the added mobility of the new system could make for the best Mass Effect combat to date. Another issue is the lack of powers available in battle, for both your character and your squad members. Yes, I realize you could switch to a new set of favorites in combat, but it was a slow and clunky maneuver to do so, and with the ability to use your squad members' powers on command being completely nixed for Andromeda, the amount of abilities available in any given combat situation dropped from 8 or 9 all the way down to 3. This unfortunate change took all the variability out of combat, and for me, was hugely disappointing. Unfortunately, this streamline effect didn't only affect combat, it also affected another major feature of the Mass Effect formula, which brings me to my second change. Number 2. Squad depth. For me, Mass Effect has always been at its best when exploring the dynamic between your character and your squad members. This is true in combat, in dialogue, during questlines, and during romances. In Andromeda, most of the game's best moments were once again tied to your squad, but this time all of these moments seem strictly tied to dialogue and romances, and frankly, Andromeda's best isn't a very high bar. Don't get me wrong, the romances were enjoyable, even though the best romance option was once again not available. Edie and Suvi, I love you both, and I did enjoy the squad's quest lines, but unfortunately due to the lack of squad control, the combat dynamic was non-existent. In the original trilogy, I was consistently torn on which squad members to bring to battle. The urge to see a character's reaction to a situation was frequently at odds with which character was best suited to the coming battle, occasionally resulting in me severely handicapping myself to see said character's reaction. But I never saw this as a bad thing, as it was a constant reminder just how much I cared for these characters. Sadly, with every squad member feeling generic in combat, this was never an issue in Andromeda. Which brings me to another issue with the squad, a complete lack of customization for my team members. Customization of your squads or followers' equipment has been a staple of RPGs because players like the idea of their story, if at least in a small way, being unique to them, in turn giving every player their very own adventure. So why this feature was missing in Andromeda is anyone's guess, but gameplay certainly took a hit. And as a consequence of this, I was consistently left with piles of weapons and armor and enhancements that either collected dust or were sold for basically nothing, just to make room for new equipment so the cycle could repeat. Sound familiar? I think an endless cycle of machines is probably the last thing that we want. All of these items would have undoubtedly been put to better use by my team, and more importantly, would have added to the gaming experience. Not even the color of their armor could be customized. I just don't understand this one. For Andromeda 2, I'd like to see this issue addressed with more customization than ever before for both your player and your squad members, for weapons and equipment before and with abilities during combat. The more customization, the better. Moving on to number 3, player choice. Yet another major issue tied to both player and squad mechanics is choices carried almost no weight or consequence for you or your team. On a few occasions during quest lines, I made what at the time seemed like big decisions that were in direct opposition to what a squad mate wanted me to do, and in all of these occasions, the only consequence for doing so was a single heated conversation where said squad mate told me how much they disagreed with my choice. And that's all. The very next time I spoke to these characters, it was like nothing had ever happened. These almost non-existent consequences took all gravity out of the prospect of player choice. This flub is yet another occasion where following the example of previous games in the series could have made for a much better experience. Longtime fans of the series will remember how choices made by your Commander Shepard resulted in the death of squad members and on a few occasions even the extermination of an entire species. And yet there wasn't ever a right or wrong answer. It's this gray area that games like The Witcher 3 or even BioWare's earlier RPGs have done a great job of emphasizing in the past, and in doing so, made for a much more captivating story. For Andromeda 2, I think tweaking the Paragon Renegade system of the original trilogy from a binary system based on morality into a system based on 3 or more attributes could make for more rewarding gameplay. For simplicity's sake, let's use 3 attributes for this example, those being strength, charm, and manipulation. Now, I'm no game designer, so bear with me here. Imagine each attribute has positive and negative aspects and is on a sliding scale, with the best rewards for each unlocking as you reach the top of the scale. Your character would progress these attributes through certain decisions or actions related to that attribute. But unlike the Paragon Renegade system, instead of certain actions and decisions being strictly tied to a single attribute, there could be a crossover between 2 attributes. For example, if your charm proficiency was ranked high enough, you could talk someone into giving you a passcode to a bank account, then by hacking this bank account, your manipulation proficiency would raise as well as your charm proficiency. These attributes could also affect how you relate to your squad members and gain their loyalty, or affect how fast you can romance a certain character. Remember now, I'm just spitballing here, but I think a system like this really could flesh out characters and relationships. Number 4, improved exploration. For a game that gives you the ability to fly from system to system and planet to planet, and a new galaxy no less, exploration is incredibly boring. Although you can travel to over 100 planets, only 5 can be freely explored. This is ridiculous. The 5 explorable planets do offer a lot of ground to cover, but the rest of the planets are basically pointless. They're nothing more than a name to knock off the list as you visit them, just to leave a few seconds later to head to another, just to stay on your path to 100% completion. For Andromeda 2 to fare better in this regard, I suggest having a few planets with larger areas to explore like they've done in this game, but more importantly, there should be many more planets with smaller areas to explore, or even with some tied strictly to quest lines. Bottom line, Andromeda 2 must have more planets available to land on and explore, which brings me to my final proposed change. Number 5, better side quests. Mass Effect Andromeda is brimming with side quests on both the planets you explore as well as your ship and the Nexus. The problem? Most all of them are forgettable and boring. With the exception of your squad's loyalty missions and the missing arc missions, almost all of the quest lines I completed felt like nothing more than time killers or glorified fetch quests, as well as plain old fetch quests. In a post-Witcher 3 world, this is simply unacceptable for a AAA title. As I mentioned in change number 4, I would love to see side quests take place across random planets or abandoned space stations or ships, even if the areas to explore are small in comparison to the main hub areas. In a game that gives you a spaceship and says go explore, tying all the quests to 5 planets is an incredible waste, especially when said quests are done so poorly. In order to keep this video from turning into a documentary, I limited myself to just 5 major changes, but there are a few other issues I'd like to briefly mention as I believe these areas also need some work. The first is better weapons. The Milky Way weapons all looked cool for the most part, but the Helios and Remnant weapons, for me anyway, were absolutely horrible. They were so aesthetically bad I couldn't even bring myself to try them. And my last 2 are kind of tied together and could probably be fixed by my 4th and 5th propositions. They are more alien species and more and better Andromedan lore. I love digging into the mysteries and deep lore system from the originals, and I'd love if Andromeda 2 could build upon what is an admittedly flawed but solid framework moving ahead. But that'll do it for this video. If you have any ideas of your own or would like to expand upon some of mine, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. And don't forget to leave a like if you think I deserve it, or to subscribe if you like my content and want to see more. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.
My strike team will hit the enemy cruiser, General. Force is the only thing fanatics understand.